everyone, welcome to Chinese Pod. My name's Fiona.
大家好，欢迎来到中文播客，我是 Constance。
Today we have a very special guest with us. We have our long-time listener, Christine.
大家好啊
You might also know her as...
狸猫
Yes, on the comments. I feel like we have this virtual friendship through the comments. It's so nice to meet you in person. And today you're delivering your 请问 question in person. And actually it relates to asking questions. But I'll let you give us the context.
OK 所以刚才我在桂林有一个1对1的口语课我的老师跟我说我经常不够礼貌会让对方觉得不舒服我会很容易伤害气氛让他们觉得得罪
被得罪了对
他说我的语气太硬了可是我没发现我做什么不礼貌的
没有不礼貌的话只是太硬了
So yeah, Christine, when you were doing your one-on-one classes, your teacher said your tone was quite harsh, right? And sometimes you might accidentally offend people. But you were just asking questions, right?
Yes, usually just asking questions. The worst one is apparently 你笑什么
我听几次都还是觉得
yeah. So here, when Christine was talking to us before we started recording, as you were explaining your situation, surely you wouldn't offend people by asking questions, right? And then once you gave us that example of 你笑什么? I think we got the problem in that there's obviously different cultural expectations to how you ask questions and how you ought to respond to questions. So there's many things there that we'd like to go through. First of all, let's talk about this. 你笑什么?
你笑什么的另外一个意思就是你不应该笑你觉得我很笨所以你问我笑什么吗
So when you say 你笑什么 what you're actually saying is you shouldn't be laughing. Why are you laughing, right? And I think this applies to anything that deals with people's emotions or how they're feeling, right? Direct questions in Chinese often are either requests. You're just telling someone to do something. You're not trying to ask a question. Or you're telling someone to stop doing something. So for a learner, you're like, but what do I do? I'm just trying to ask why it's funny. So what do we do, Constance?
比较简单的方法就是请问你们在笑什么还有要笑请问你们在笑什么呢
Solution 1 Just tag 请问 onto anything. It immediately softens your tone and puts you kind of in a lower position when you're asking 请问你们在笑什么 So that's solution number 1.
要注意刚刚有一个你们在笑什么会好一点点
Yeah, so what are you currently laughing at?
对那第二个呢就是你可以句子说长一点你们在笑什么可以告诉我吗
Okay. So solution number 2 Add more information to your sentences. Make your sentences a bit longer so they sound less harsh and less direct because it doesn't sound like you're just requesting that one piece of information. You're like, oh, so what are you guys laughing at? Could you tell me? 可以告訴我嗎? Also, just one thing I wanted to add, because Christine's pronunciation is so good. When we hear you speak, we're like, you get us, you get the social etiquette, right? Of course, right? So I think it's important to remind people that you're still a learner. You're still a learner.
不懂
Yeah, 我不懂可以解释给我听吗
对
right?
可以麻烦你解释给我听吗
So there you go. You're reminding the person you're speaking to that you're not a native speaker. You're not fluent. You're still learning. And I just don't understand what's going on.
对所以不好意思我没听懂
So there you go.
麻烦你解释
Solution number 3. Remind people you're still learning Chinese.
对没错
Now, on the topic of asking questions, I'm sure you find yourself or sometimes find yourself wondering, is this an okay question to ask? Am I breaking some kind of social etiquette here? You don't know if you're asking an appropriate or private question. So Constance, can you help us out with that?
所以我们就先让他知道我可能要问一个也许没有礼貌的问题，所以就说我可不可以问你一个比较私人的问题？
So you're giving the person a bit of warning that this question might be a bit, in this case, might be a private or a personal question. So 我可不可以问你一个比较私人的问题？
对。
So there might be some situations where you're not asking a personal or private question per se, but you're worried that you might cause offense by asking about their political opinions or maybe what they think on a particular topic. So what would we say then?
这时候要记得一个词叫做冒昧。
冒昧.
对。
Right? And that literally means I'm risking the chance of you feeling offended. So it's essentially we're saying you're apologizing in advance. You said so. This might risk I might offend here, but I would like to know. In Chinese, it sounds super polite. So can we have the full sentence?
比方说，可以冒昧请问你今年多大吗？
Yeah.
或者是可以冒昧请问你投票给谁了？
Yeah, who did you vote for? May I politely ask how old you are? May I politely ask who you voted for or what your opinion on this
对
president is, for example. 可以冒昧地问你对这个人的看法吗？
对对对。
Now that we've learned how to politely ask, could I ask you a personal question? 我可以问你一个私人的问题吗？我可以冒昧地请教你 blah 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 blah. I'm sure we've all been in that situation where a Chinese friend has asked us actually quite a personal or an answer that I don't want to answer. What do we do, Constance?
这时候你可以跟他说，不好意思，我不方便说，或是我不方便回答。
So, key word here, guys. 不方便. 不方便 is so much better. It's inconvenient for me, or I don't feel that comfortable responding. It's so much better than 我不想说. Yeah. So it's buff all your sentences out with 不太方便，我不太想说，对。However, if you're in the situation where someone asks you a personal question and you might be comfortable responding to it, maybe you just want to know what kind of question is this?
你可以说得看是哪方面的问题，或是那要看是哪方面的问题。
是哪方面的问题 What kind of question? What kind of territory are we going into? And then if you still don't feel comfortable, you can say 我不方便说。
对
right? I don't feel comfortable.
所以如果人家说我可以问你一个比较私人的问题吗？那你可以比较小心一点，就说得看是哪
方面的问题。
对，这样子就会他就知道 OK， 那我可以继续跟你聊天。那如果你就说可能不太方便回答，那这个就结束了。
好 OK
你们以前跟我说要建筑出口。
哎，对对对。
对 That's a great. So let's move on to our final segment of this 请问. So I feel like a key concept to understand is when you're asking a question in Chinese, always give the person the opportunity to either not respond or to say no. And I know this is so hard for you guys because our social etiquette dictates that we have to ask you for things, where we have to be like, would you like me to pick you up from the airport? Because we would be seen as bad hosts if we didn't ask. But the real assumption is for you to say,
不用啊。
no. And this can be so difficult when you start learning Chinese, right? You're getting all these mixed messages, these weird social cues. They're like, Christine, 我下个星期去机场接你好吗? And you're like,
OK，
yeah, 好啊，
谢谢。
谢。
那你可能会在1天以前接到他的电话说，不好意思，我今天很忙，没办法去。对。
So let's break that down a bit. So I feel like often in many circumstances when people, so it goes both ways, right? So when people are asking you a question and you're responding, you should still bear that in mind. Always give the person the option to say no. So specifically in that example of, would you like me to pick you up from the airport? Or would you like me to pick you up from the train station? This is personal experience right, for you.
但最好的回答其实是 如果方便的话，那就太好了。不方便的话也没关系。
That's a perfect example. Let's have the first half of that. If it's convenient, that would be excellent.
对，如果方便的话，那太好了。
对，但是不方便的话也没关系。So when someone's asking you that direct question, you're giving them two options, right? And here I'm going to give you a little social mind trick. Always kill them with the ultimate polite answer, because then they'll feel so guilty that you've been so polite. 但是你知道我从加拿大飞过来特别No, I'm just kidding.
我就真的很希望一来就见到你啊。
但是如果不方便的话，真的没关系。
突然变得很
And you might think, oh well, isn't that being a bit insincere, right? Surely we should be honest with our new friends. But I think there is something we didn't realize that Christine brought up is in Chinese pop, when we're giving you these conversations, they're either very formal, so it's either in a business or an academic setting, or they're between very close friends where the relationship's established. And I can't really offend you, but there's definitely that phase at the beginning of a friendship where the lines of formality haven't quite been drawn, and you ought to, this is sincere advice, you ought to lean more on the side of being a bit more formal, giving them those options. And then you can gauge, right? You can gauge how comfortable how close someone would like to be with you at that particular stage. It's not to say that they don't want to be your friend in the future, but give them that space. Could we ask, would that be okay for your schedule?
那你就可以说，明天你时间方便吗？我们还是可以一块出去吗？这样子。
你时间上方便吗？
对。
Is that okay with your schedule to pick me up from the airport? And if they go, 如果可以的话，如果你自己来，对我来说比较方便。Then you know, right? Then it's clear. But expect that you're going to have to pass the ball around a couple of times before you get to that real answer. And that might be frustrating at first, but you'll soon learn that dance, right? Formal to informal friendships, that weird awkward phase where you're going from an acquaintance to a friend. The long and short of it is Chinese questions are really
复试一个问题。
I never knew that was something that learners like you would struggle with, but it's a good thing to talk about. All right, well, we hope you enjoyed today's lesson and found it a bit helpful. If we were to recap a couple of phrases that you found most useful, what would they be, Christine?
方便的话。
方便的话 right?
可以怎么
样？
还有可以问一个比较私人的问题吗？ 还有可以冒昧请问你一个什么什么？
Yeah, so these are some great phrases, and if in doubt, guys, just tag 请问 at the front of your sentence.
请问
Yeah, 请问 blah blah blah.
怎么样
All right, and speaking of 请问, we'll see you at the next 请问, and maybe there will be another special guest joining us for the next 请问. We'll see you again next time, guys. Bye.
再见。